Okay, so back into Photoshop. So this is the first of our layers that we're going to actually try to build. So I'm going to double click on the hand to kick all the way back out again. Again, you see me do this over and over and over again, but because I'm always constantly trying to spot problems and see if I've got issues and all of that kind of stuff, and you know, just that's just sort of the nature of how I work. However, I'm feeling pretty confident about this guy, so we're going to just start with our next layer. So I'm going to make another copy of my original version down there at the very bottom. Command J will actually give me a copy of it. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the very top. You'll know that it's at the very top when you get that little blue line that goes right underneath where it says lock, and it's got the different series of locks. You need to get that all the way up to that little blue line to show, and then it will actually go, it'll be all the way to the top. I'm going to double click on the name and type in sweater because that's what I'm going to go after next. And to get the sweater, I'm actually going to work with Select and Mask. Select and Mask does a really good job of it, and the reason that this happens is this. Although it doesn't look like it, if you actually hover over the, I'm not looking at her hand right here, so I'm hovering over like the knuckle area of her hand and some area right in there. And you can see in here I've got like a blue value that's running around the high 30s and the low 40s. And if I come over to the yellow, it's really close to the same thing. The amount of yellow that's actually in the sweater and that's in her hands is almost identical, which makes building this selection based on color really difficult, because even though the other colors in her skin make it seem like it's different tonally, from Photoshop's point of view, trying to compare this yellow with the yellow that's in her skin, they're almost identical. It's the same issue that you've got going with her hair and her cheek part up in here. The advantage to using the Select and Mask workspace, though, is that it actually it combines the two. So if we were to come up and do let's say we wanted just a color selection, we could come up to the Select menu, come down to Color Range. Everybody do this with me really quickly, just so you can sort of see the quality of the selection. So Select menu, down to Color Range. When this opens up, leave it at sampled colors. That's what we actually always want to use on this. You've got a drop-down menu here where you could pick yellows, but it doesn't do a really good job of it. You can see the difference and then disconnect between her skin tone and that shadow that's right underneath it on the yellow. It's pretty much indistinguishable. You're not really going to see it. If we go back to the sampled colors, you can try to get it a little bit better. We can select on the yellow sweater. So I've got the yellow sweater initially picked. I'm going to drag my fuzziness down to about a 35 just so that you can sort of see what's going on. To get more of that selection, what you can do is go to the plus eyedropper and then simply click and drag across an area of the sweater and click and drag across it again. We'll pick up more areas of the sweater. I'm going to click and drag across the arm. So what I'm doing is I'm actually adding more tones of yellow to this. Then you can actually use your fuzziness slider to sort of drag and kick up again. But the problem is now, look at the color. I'm beginning to lighten up her skin tone, so that's going to be part of my selection. So it works on color somewhat, but it would be better if I had a system that not only worked on color, but worked on tone together at the same time. And I can't get that any other way. I can't get that with the color range tools. I can't really get that in my, if we take a look at my channels here, you can see there's such little difference between the hand and the shadow part. The green is no better, and the blue is no better as well. So, yes? So it's just a question on what you've hit your sampled color on. You haven't made a sample yet. So click on where the sweater is. Click on where the sort of that part of her sweater actually would be. And then again, click on the, so I'll go back and do this with you. So select color range. Now again, I use the drop-down selection preview to be, I set it to grayscale, so it's a big version of my small little preview. But to start off with, because it gets really hard to see where that sweater might be, you can actually say none and then still select. So again, I've got my initial eyedropper tool, and I'm simply going to click on the yellow sweater, and you can see in the small little preview it shows up, and then go to your grayscale. And now again, if I don't select the plus eyedropper, all it's going to do is build a different selection. It gets rid of the first one and does the sleeve. If I go down into here, it's going to make a selection based on that. And I need to add to this selection. And that's when the second of the eyedroppers comes in, the add eyedropper. It's got a little plus on it. And now I can not only just click different areas, you can click and drag across entire areas and you will get a much bigger range of yellow. And again, fuzziness will control how far away from that whole selected set of colors you can go in order to actually build your selection. But again, look at the separation between her skin and the sweater. It's non-existent right here. So again, it's getting the color part of it correctly, but it doesn't get, it would be better if I had a system that could not only do color, but also tone. Because if we look at this, you can see that the tone is different on the sweater than it is on her hand. So if I can combine tone and color in a selection process, I stand the chance of getting a better selection. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got the sweater selected on the very top. I'm going to come up to the select menu, down to select and mask. The image looks grayed out because I've got it set, my view is set to onion skin, and I've got my transparency at 50%. If I drag my transparency all the way up, it will actually show me, it gets rid of the image that I've got, and I only see the mask that's underneath it. If I go all the way down, it just shows me the layer that I'm on. If I do the 50%, what it'll show me is the areas that are selected, because you can see it looks like there's this mist on this image. But if I go to the quick selection tool, the tool palette on the far left-hand side at the top, I'm going to then select her sweater. Again, this is a quick selection tool, so I can make the brush a little bit larger. I'm simply going to click on the yellow and start to work my way down, and then across to the sleeve. Again, stay away from the edges you want this thing defined. And then I'm going to do the other sleeve, and then the rest of the sweater. There's the small little sweater in the back. I'm going to try to get it using the quick selection tool. It gets a little dicey down in the bottom, but I've already got a selection made of that in my path. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I don't want to fuck with this thing in the back. I've already got a selection for it, so I don't need to screw with that part, so I'm not gonna. Yes? Click on your drop-down menu. You're on the onion skin. Perfect. Hit cancel out of here. Let's see where you started from.
Also, sorry, I got with doing that.
We can come back to this, okay? So yeah, so we can just do the sweater part. Turn both of those eyeballs off. And on the sweater part, come up to the select menu, down to select and mask. And then your transparency in 50%. Okay, and then grab this quick selection tool and make it bigger because that's really small. Good, and then just make sure you stay away from all the edges, but you want to select all the sweater.
All right, thank you.
And we're not doing the back side?
What do you mean not doing the back side? Oh, no, we got to hit everything, so hang on. So your zoom tools still work here as well. So spacebar command option will give you the minus magnifying tool, and you can zip back out. I'm going to make my quick selection tool a little bit bigger and go ahead and select the whole bottom of all of this. It's all sweater. And make sure you've got that top shoulder. And then there is a shoulder. There's an area that's right here in the back right here. We can try to get this with the quick selection tool. If it doesn't work, I'm going to hit it with the pen tool instead. And you'll see when I come into it like this doesn't look really that good to me. So I'm going to just hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to hit that with the pen tool. It's just too easy to do. So if you want to see the quality of this selection right now, which I do, but look at this. I've got a problem, I think, right around her wrist area. A lot of you guys missed this part. If you click on your drop-down menu and the properties on the top right-hand side, click on that drop-down menu and come down to black and white. it will show you the mask that it's ultimately going to build. And when I look around here, there's a lot of things I like about this mask. The edge here is scalloped, the edge of the sweater against her skin, and it's got that scalloping in it. I don't want to clean this out anymore. It, again, should have that fuzzy transition to her skin, so I like that part. The edge of her hand is pretty good. I've got little fuzzy parts along the top of the sweater part right here, the top of her wrist. What I don't like is this transition part that's happening right here where the two sleeves are sort of coming together. I can go back up and look at my onion skin and I can see that there is a problem right there. So I can try to hit this with the quick selection tool and we'll see. Again, you can't let that touch the edge you don't want it to touch. That only made things worse, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And instead, I'm going to go to the next tool down, which is the Refine Edge tool. Now this tool you can be a little sloppier about. It doesn't need to actually find the edge. It can go over that whole edge. So I'm simply going to click and drag over that. It looks to me like that got all the skin, but again, to check, click on your drop-down menu and look at the black and white part, and you can see it did fix it pretty well. I've got some contamination that's in the background, and I don't have a perfect black in that part right there, but that's an easy overlay brush cleanup once we get this mask made. So I'm going to continue to look around here. Everybody else is looking pretty good in this. I'm going to zip back out. Make sure that I've gotten everything else in here. Everybody else in here is looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So it actually created the mask right on my sweater, and I feel pretty good about that part, but I am going to go in and clean up those areas that I was talking about. So that area where her hand is going into the left sleeve, I know that that's a problem. If you hold down the Option key and click on the layer mask, you simply see the layer mask, and I'm going to clean all of this up. Hit the B key to get the brush tool, change the blending mode to overlay. I am going to make this a medium hard tool. 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then make it considerably smaller. I'm going to run just down, Command Z to undo that. Black was my foreground color, which is a mistake. I'm trying to clean up the white first. So hit the X key to get white to be my foreground color. And I'm simply going to run down here to clean those parts up. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm staying away from the very edge at the top of this where all that fuzzy sweater is. I don't want to run the overlay brush on that part if I can avoid it, because I will lose all that fuzzy part. But I do need to go ahead and clean out the black part of this mask that's right here in this edge. So the X key to get to black and simply paint across all of that. Again, don't be too aggressive with your brush. Get the areas that you need to get, but other than that, don't worry about it. I'm taking a look around everybody else. I'm just running around my mask to check to make sure I don't have any other contamination in it. The last thing, I'm feeling pretty good about all of this. I like the way that scallop edge works in here. So again, if you want to see the entire layer again, simply click on the pixel content of it and you'll see the whole layer part. It's missing a little bit on this top edge. It looks like there's a little something that's actually showing out on the very top edge. I'm going to go take a peek and see what that really means. Hold down the Option key and click on the layer mask. I'm okay with what's going on there, so I'm not going to fuck around with that too much. But I know I need to get that one little part of the sweater that's going right behind her neck. So to get that, I can't have the layer mask on, or I just need to see the image without the layer mask. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click on the layer mask. It temporarily gets rid of it. Then I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I'm going to pen tool out the sweater that's on the back side of, it's going around the back of her neck. So I'm going to start up on the shoulder, come in and click in, and just drag through to actually get a selection going. Again, once you come down into the sweater itself, back under the front part of her shoulder, you don't need to draw that line. It's going to be a whole part of the mask. So you just need to finish it all. So this is what my path looks like. I'm going to go to path. I'm going to double click on the name here, and I'm going to call it shoulder. And say OK. I'm going to Command click on the path icon to load it as a selection. I'm going to go up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. You notice a pattern in here. I'm going to do a 3 pixel feather on this. I mean a 0.3 pixel feather on this and say OK. And then I'm going to go back to my layer mask, and I'm going to click on the X to make it so that the X goes away. And I've actually got my selection going in here. This is part of the sweater. This needs to be white. Now it looks like it's white here because I've got a white background that's showing through it. But on my layer mask, if you hold down the Option key and click on it to see it, you can see this area needs to be white, and it is not white. So again, white is my background color, so Command Delete will fill that with white. Command D to deselect. And this is now my knockout of my sweater. So again, you'll see that there's a little bit along here that was not maybe the most perfect selection in the world. But again, at the end of the day, no one's going to know that because you are losing sweater, not gaining background. Double click on the hand to check everything else. Everybody else looks good in here, and save your work. So, did that work for everyone? Did that not? Okay, so where did you get lost? Like the beginning? You want to do this really quickly, once from the top?
Yes.
Okay, no, we're just, guys, this is what we're here to do today. I do not want to go beyond today without you guys understanding this stuff. So that took us 15, 20 minutes. We can do it in 10.
I just got a quick question.
Shoot.
If we want to go back and like brush out an area on that selected mask, is there a way to do that?
Well, we can work right here on the mask itself, like right here. Oops, sorry. I've got the mask right here. I could go in on this mask, hit the B key, make it larger. I'm going to change it to normal. And black is my foreground color, and I'm going to fuck up the sweater. There's nothing stopping you from doing all the shit that we've done all along onto our masks.
Perfect.
Right?
I'm just trying to refine like a little corner.
So you can go in and define so what little corner?
It was like the corner by where we just made the selection.
Yeah, so we're going to do this again, and you'll see exactly what I was talking about. So I'm going to throw this layer mask away. So we're going to start from scratch. Okay, so we have a blank layer. We have a copy of the new version, and it's called Sweater, correct? Everybody, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Up to the Select menu, down to Select and Mask. And it looks like your image has been ghosted. So go to your View menu up in Properties and come down to the onion skin. It's the very top view. I'm sorry? Okay, that's fine, that's fine. Make sure that your transparency is set at 50%. And it doesn't look frosted?
I was having a similar issue.
It may be, if you've got a selection going, that's a problem. If you've got a mask selected, that's also a problem. Okay, so hit cancel out of here. Okay, so we've got this guy. Perfect. So select menu, select and mask. Click on that drop down. Oh, yeah, drop down. Let me just make sure onion skin's correct. You're good, you're good. And drag your solder all the way up and then go all the way down. Okay, that's our problem. Hit cancel out of here. Let's turn off everybody else underneath this.
Turn off.
Just turn the eyeballs off. Yeah, that got two. Perfect, and let's try it again. Boom. It's okay. So then up to the quick selection tool, the top one.
Oh.
And you're going to select just the sweater. Nope, you came across the hand. Again, you want it to find that edge so don't ever touch that edge. Yeah, you can get close to the edge, you just can't touch it. And the shoulder. Perfect, that part down there. So check to see if this is what you think it is. Click on the drop-down menu right there. Come down to black and white, and you'll see what the mask is going to be, and that actually looks very good.
Okay.
Right? So then we're going to say OK to this. But we've got that little problem right in the corner there. See that piece of skin that's in there? We're going to fix that. So hang on. Is everybody else okay? So guys, sometimes this happens to me, and I'll just give you a quick trick. If something is not working in Select and Mask, usually what it is it's a consequence of having layers on underneath it. So just turn, if you want to turn everything else off except for the layer you're working on, hold down the Option key and simply click on the eyeball of the layer you're working on. It turns everybody else off. If you hold down your Option key and click on that eyeball again, it'll turn everybody else back on. But I typically do my Select and Mask work with nothing else showing, nothing else underneath it. And then again, up to Select and Mask. It shows it all grayed out. The top tool is the Refine Edge tool, is the Quick Selection tool. Make it a little bit larger. And then just select across all of the sweater, but do not touch any edge you want it to find, because again, that defeats the whole purpose of the tool. And I'm pretty good right here. I'm going to refine the rest of this once I get back into Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. So is everybody at least this far?
Yes.
Okay, so to go back to the problem when we were talking about how do we refine the mask now, sorry. I just need to zoom in to where the two sleeves are touching. And you can see I've got a problem that's right here, and the problem that's right there is skin that's actually showing in here. So I spot this and I say, oh, I got to deal with this. You can go right back into Select and Mask. Make sure that you've got the mask selected. Then if you look at Properties, Select and Mask is an option right here, or you go back up to the Select menu, down to Select and Mask. It'll bring you right back in, and you can sort of see that there's an area right there. Everybody else is sort of like ghosted out, but this area is selected just as much as the sweater part is selected, and I need to get rid of that. So if you can't do it with the Quick Selection tool, you've got to come to the next one down, which is the Refine Selection tool, and then simply paint over that little area. And you see that it now looks like the ghosting and checkerboarding has actually been applied to this area as well. So I'm going to say, okay, it's just how you refine that edge a little bit. And you can see it did a pretty good job of it. But if you're not happy with ultimately the way this looks, hold down the Option key and click on the mask. And now you can really see what the mask looks like. And you can see I've got contamination in here. So this is how you can ultimately edit your mask after you get out of Select and Mask. Does that make sense to everyone? So again, the B key to get a brush, change it to a blending mode of overlay. I'm going to make it a medium hard brush. Mine is. I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to hit the X key to make white my foreground color, and I'm going to clean up just that little bitty edge that's right there, and then I'm also going to clean up the edge that's right underneath it. I'm going to hit the X key to get to black and clean up the part on the skin, and I am done. So the final thing that I need to do is fill in the part of the sweater that goes back behind her neck. So I actually did pen selection of this area that's on the back part of the sweater. This is what it actually looks like. You can see that's my path right there. I'm going to Command click to load that as a selection, up to the Select menu, down to Modify, and then over to Feather, just to soften that edge a little bit. 1/3 of a pixel is how much I'm going to feather it. And then go back to my layer mask where I'm working right here. And again, that sweater, it needs to show, meaning I need to fill this with white on the layer mask. So make sure that you're on the layer mask and not on the pixel part. White is my background color, so Command Delete fills that. Command D to deselect, and I'm done. Yeah.
What did we do this morning with the selecting the pass, and it did my entire thing. So I'm at the select thing, but what did you put?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So hold on, where am I? So here.
Yeah.
And then I did command click, so this is here, and then all this was selected. So you went up, and then you did.
So, but wait, you just selected your, this is your path.
Yeah, and then so I did command click, but I have marching answer on my.
Yeah, no, so hit Command D to deselect. Hover over that guy again and command click him again. And it's everybody else, so then just go up to the select menu and do inverse. I don't know why yours is selecting everything but that, and now it's just that guy selected.
All right. And
So then go back to your layers palette,
and
and then you need to be on the layer mask, which you are, and that needs to be filled with white.
Is it the brush? Oh, it is the brush I'm using. Wow.
Oh yeah, if your brush was at overlay, it won't do anything.
Wow.
Yep. So did that make sense about how you can refine your mask after the fact?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yes, hang on. It's all right. Okay,
So
shoot.
I have it selected, but I wanted to put it here, and it's not going there. Like it goes on the top.
So you have a selection. Where did the selection come from?
I don't even know what I did afterward. I think I got lost now.
No, that's okay. So let's go take a look at your path palette really quick. So yeah, I don't know if that, so hit Command D to just deselect. Good, and then click underneath this work path. So that is your work path right there. So that part's actually good, but double click on that because that work path is temporary and you'll lose it if you don't do that, and just call it shoulder. Okay, and say okay. And then back to layers. So we need to do select and mask again on this guy. So again, click on this up to select, down to select and mask. And we're all covered up, so that's fine. So you need to zoom back out just a little bit. And I don't know what this is about.
I don't know it. Yeah.
Let's go back to your hit cancel. Let's go back to your layers palette. Turn off this guy, turn off that guy, and that guy. Probably, and go back into select and mask now. Perfect. And then select the quick selection tool, the first one. Come back over here, make it a little bit larger. And you can afford to make it larger, and just stay away from the edge. Yeah, you can be pretty quick about this. And all the way down, all the way across. Good, and then just click on this drop-down menu to go to black and white. Looks good, so you can go ahead and say okay to this. And that's now your mask, although that's the problem. Go back into select and mask. You've got the output set to, scroll down, you've got your output set to selection. Change this to layer mask. And then say okay. That's what you're looking for. And then your pen tool is correct, so go to the path. Hover over the thumbnail and hit option, hold down command click, command, not option, command. Loads that as a selection, up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. Put in 0.3, not 5. Say okay. Good, and then back to layer. You're on your mask. This needs to be filled with white. White is your foreground color. Option delete. Command D to deselect. And you're off to the races.
Okay, so I was listening. I just got lost for like how to make the pen a selection. So I have it selected. I put it at the 0.3 feather, and then.
So now on this mask, it needs to be, those areas need to be white to
Yes.
show. So you just
Yes.
need to fill them with white. White's your foreground color. Option delete. No, that was option D.
Oh,
That
that's what I keep
deselected.
doing.
Command Z, it might bring your selection back.
No, my selections are still here, no?
Yeah, well, you just got them back. So now, again, option delete to fill those areas with white. And you've got something on underneath here, so you can't really see what's going on. There's an image down there that's turned on. Keep going down. Turn that guy off and turn the next one off. You can't see what the mask is doing because you got those guys on. Now you can see what it's doing.
Okay.
Okay, we're almost done. We're almost done. We're almost done. Is there anybody else? we're missing the part of the sweater that's on the other side. So we need to go get it really quick. So again, I'm simply going to hold down the shift key and click on my layer mask to temporarily hide it so that I can use the pen tool, so that I can use the pen tool to get this guy in here, right in here. So again, I've already got part of this path already made. Remember when I did thumbnail? This was actually the thumbnail one. It was the entire inner part of this guy. I'm just going to copy that thumbnail. I'm going to rename it sweater, shoulder, and say OK to that. I'm going to grab the white path selection, the direct selection tool. I'm going to drag across the entire path so all of those little elements are selected. I'm going to click on the very top point. It goes blue, everybody else is white. I'm going to hit the X key. It actually breaks those apart. Then I can use the direct selection tool to simply, click on the point that was sort of in the middle-ish there and just slide it down a little bit. So I want it to be just about the sweater. And that part actually looks pretty good to me. However, I've got 2 control handles on this, and I need this to be starting afresh. I don't want that second control handle. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click to get rid of the second handle. Then hit the P key to get the pen tool. Click on that point that's sitting right up there. And again, I've got that second control handle came back, so I'm holding down the Option key and clicking to get rid of it. And then finally, I'm going to come down here and complete my path. So this is now the sweater shoulder. I'm going to Command click to load this as a selection. Up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. My 0.3 pixel feather will be fine. I'm going to say OK to that. And then go back to my sweater mask, click on it to get rid of the red X. This area is still active going. And again, I need this area in my layer mask. Right now it's black. I need it to be white in order to show the sweater. So I'm on the layer mask. You can see I got my brackets around it. And I am going to, white is my background color, so I'm going to hit Command Delete, Command D to deselect. Double click on the hand, and this is my selection for my layer, the layer mask for my sweater. However, this is something to know. If you look over in your channels palette right now, you'll see down at the bottom, there's this thing called sweater mask with a sort of like little, it looks like a little mark that's next to it. It used to be in the old days of Photoshop, whenever you had a temporary mask, they would actually put this in italics. They don't put this in italics anymore, which I think is a mistake. But watch what happens. Just watch my screen to see what happens. I'm going to actually select a different layer, and you'll notice that that thing is gone. So we need to keep it. I get into the habit, I want to be in the habit of actually keeping these as discrete channels, not just as layer masks, but as discrete channels. So I'm going to go ahead and select that sweater layer again, and then simply grab the sweater mask and drag it down onto the little icon, and then you can double click on it and get rid of the whole copy and mask part of it. It just needs to be sweater. And now, if you select a different layer, you've still got the sweater one is visible and actually showing. But you'll see that happens for everything. You can see like I've got the blue background, and I've actually got a blue background channel right here, but I've also got the blue background mask. It's only because this layer is active. If I come down here and turn on and make the color fill white, you'll see I've really only got a blue background mask, or a blue background channel, alpha channel, and a sweater alpha channel, and that's all I have going. And then again, save your work. No, you don't. You have it on the layer, but you don't have it in your channels. So if you deselect that layer that's got that sweater mask on it, just pick any other layer, you will not have it in your channels palette. Right? So it's redundant. To be perfectly honest with you, the mask is always going to be on that layer channel, but it's just for me, just sort of a safety way of dealing with it all. Okay, I know you think we're a million miles away though, guys, but we're not. Is everybody hanging in there? Okay, time to make another copy of this layer of the new version. So I'm going all the way down to the bottom, not the very bottom, but the new version. Command J to make a copy of it. I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top. Your screen should scroll to the top. Make sure you get the little blue line between the lock area of your layers palette and the sweater layer that we just made. And again, mine didn't feel like I got up there. Sometimes that's a problem in using a tablet when doing that. When you actually go to lift your stylus up off the tablet, it actually moves your layer. So I'm going to turn everybody else off so that we don't have this same problem that we had again. So now I've got to make a selection between the hair and her skin. So again, I'm going to use select and mask for this, and the reason I'm doing that is, again, I want to leverage the difference, although it's very slight, but the difference in the color between her face, her skin tone, and her hair, but also if there's any tonal separation. So hopefully we'll pick up some of the little highlights on the shiny part of her hair. I'm hoping I can get a better version of this, but that's where I'm going to go next. And I'm going to do it actually selecting the hair. That's going to be the one that I'm going to go after. I think in many ways it's an easier one to deal with, and partly because, well, we'll see if it's easier or not. So here goes nothing. So I'm going to select, I've got my new version up here. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to call it hair. And I'm going to go to my select and mask menu. And again, I'm going to zip back out. It's the same thing. Hopefully everyone's got, please tell me everyone's got sort of like a ghosted over image completely. Terrific. I'm going to select the top tool, the quick selection tool. And I'm simply going to go over this part of her hair. And I'm going to make the tool a little bit smaller to go over the other part of her hair. I'm going to sort of drag across the top. But again, you want to make sure that you're really careful about those areas in there. So at this stage of the game, I don't have the hair that's actually sitting here back behind her, her fingers that are actually back here. We can try to go after it by making this brush really small and sort of like going in here and seeing if it'll pick up on that. In my opinion, that grabs way too much of her skin, so there's got to be a better way of getting that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit Command Z, gets rid of my first stroke, but I did 2 strokes. I need to get rid of this little dot, so it's Command Option Z will get rid of the rest of part of it all. Photoshop has actually added something because so many people do this kind of work. They've added this thing up here called Refine Hair. I'm going to simply click. It's a button that's at the very top, right underneath your options palette. Click on the button that says Refine Hair. It did a reasonably good job on one side. It didn't do a really great job though. So on the right-hand side, it actually cleaned that part out pretty well, I think. On the left-hand side, it didn't do so well over here, so I'm going to manually paint this in. It's the next tool down. It's the Refine Edge tool. I'm going to select that and then make it a little bit larger. So this is the tool that you want to paint over the edges. You don't want this. This is not the quick selection tool where you're trying to avoid the edges. This is the one where you really want to go over both areas that are common. So I'm going to start to paint across all of this area to see what it begins to do. And I'm going to get down to the bottom. And again, it's a janky, ugly looking ass edge, but it's better than what I've got going right now. So I'm also going to use this tool around the other part of her face. And again, I'm going to try, don't use this tool where you don't have to. So don't go into the hair a whole lot. I'm going to stay just along that edge. And it's picking up too much of her eyebrows there, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'm not going to worry about that eyelash right now, but this is about as good as this whole thing is going to get. If you feel like you got a little too much hair, like here down at the bottom, which I feel like I did, you can hit the minus part of that tool that's, again, up in the options palette and paint over this area again, and it will remove the Refine Edge tool from that little bit. And I'm just going to let the skin behind that go. I'm not going to worry about that part too much. I'm looking at the rest. I'm feeling somewhat okay about this. I would like the eyebrow here. It's not selected, and I would like it. I I don't want the eyebrow to be knocked out as well. So I'm going to make this tool considerably smaller. I've still got the negative one right there, and I'm simply going to draw across that. That's not going to work either. Command Z to undo that. I'll fix that later once I get this thing going. So I'm going to kick back out. This is going to be about as good as this guy gets, so I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. And it doesn't look bad. There's a couple of things that I can do to sort of fix this to make it look a little bit better. So you can see, for instance, there's an area right in here where the eyelashes are, part of her eyebrows in here, part of the eyelashes in here as well that I don't really want in here. It's all on the layer mask. If you hold down the Option key and click on your layer mask, you can see where the problem is. And you can also see how we need to ultimately fix this guy. So I'm going to start using a regular brush, the B key to get a regular brush. I'm not going to do it, well, I don't think I'm not going to do this as an overlay brush. I'm going to start at normal because I've got a pretty clean edge right here. So it's a normal brush. I'm actually going to make it a completely hard brush. And not a completely hard. Let's do about 75%. And I'm going to zoom into this area over here. Actually, I'm going to make this overlay. I'm just going to, you don't need to change anything else, change it to overlay. And I'm going to hit this just once right there. And that actually cleaned that up pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of that. And then there's the whole eye where her eyelashes are shooting out. That's also a part of it. But now I can see a better line of her hair. But I know I'm transitioning from skin into hair, and I'm nervous about how that's going to happen. So I'm going to stay with my overlay. I'm actually going to make this a completely soft brush. You can sort of see the line where you need this to actually work. I'm going to make my brush larger. The larger your brush is, the more of a soft edge that you've actually got. And now I'm going to drop my flow down. I'm going to bring my flow all the way down to like 5 or 6%, 4%, something like that. It's going to allow me to take time coming in here, scrubbing back and forth to try to get a better transitional edge in here. So I'm going to start coming up in here, and I'm just painting back and forth. That shows me that my flow is a little too low, so I'm going to crank my flow up to closer to like a 12, and then just start to scrub in here. And again, there's no perfect end in this, guys. You're sort of like just trying to get it to seem a little bit better in here, a little more transition-y. Again, we're not looking for an exchange of black to white in here. You can hit the X key to go to a white color, and you can actually clean up the other edge that's over on the other side a little bit more. And again, probably bring back, because again, where I'm painting with white is bringing hair back into this scenario. So I'm just coming in a little bit on this guy, and you can see flow is sort of like doing it easier. I can go back to my X key and make my brush a little bit smaller to try to clean up a little bit of that transition as it goes into here. That all feels a little bit better. And that's probably about as good as this is going to get. I can probably hit this area up in here. Sorry. X key, a little bit better in here. I'm going to double click on the hand. I'm feeling pretty good about that. I'll click on this image again to turn the highlight part of it on. I'm going to turn my white background on, and you can sort of see and take a look at what's going on here. Now, we could try to clean a little bit more of this skin out on this hair right here, but I want to do that. If I'm going to do it, I want to see this in real time. So I've got my hair mask is actually selected. You can see it's got the little brackets that are around it. I am going to go to the B key to get a brush. It's still overlay. I'm going to drag my flow up even higher, so up around in the 20s. Again, what I'm trying to do is I need to hide this skin. That is black on my layer mask, so I need to be painting with black. So I'm going to hit the X key to paint with black, and I'm just going to start scrubbing over this part in here to try to bring out a little bit more. Again, there's nothing that's going to be perfect in here, but this is actually helping me out a little bit. This is the part of her eyebrow right here that I can just get rid of, but I'm sort of giving that edge a little bit of, it's not quite so hard. And I think that's probably about as good as it's going to get. So I'm going to again come up to my image menu, come down and do a save. Again, just like we did before, I do not have a dedicated channel for just this hair. I've got the hair mask, but that's only because it's sitting on this layer. If I select the sweater underneath it, I lose the hair mask. So to make sure that I've got a discrete, separate copy of that hair selection, I'm going to grab the hair mask, drag it down to the little square with the plus in it, double click on this to get rid of the copy and the mask label, and just leave it as hair. And then save your selection again. Okay, did everybody get through the hair part? Okay, so now comes the easiest part of all, and the quickest. So here's the trick. We've got the hair, we have the sweater, we've got the blue background. So what I'm going to do over here in my channels palette is I'm just going to click on add a new channel. It adds this thing called Alpha 1. It's sitting right down at the bottom. You need to change the name Alpha 1 to Skin. And then we need to think about what we want the skin to do. We want the skin to actually be white. Right now this alpha channel is black, so I'm going to invert it, Command I. So now I've just got, it's a channel, it's got nothing has been done to it, but nonetheless, I'm good to go on this part. So I'm going to start with the hair. Again, leave the skin channel selected. Do not select the hair, because then you've not only selected the channel, which you can make a selection of, but then you've got to go back down and select the skin again. Just leave the skin selected, hover over the icon of the hair, hold down the Command key and click. It loads the hair as a selection. Black is my foreground color, so Option Delete fills it with black. Command D to deselect. Scroll up to the sweater. Do not select the sweater channel. Simply hover over the icon, hold down the Command key, click to load it as a selection, and fill that with black. Black is my foreground color. Option Delete fills that. Command D to deselect. And then finally, the blue background. Go up to the blue background, hold down the Command key, hover. Oh, don't select the blue background. Just hover over hover over the icon, hold down the Command key, click. That loads it as a background. It loads it as a selection. And again, it's still working on this skin channel. Fill that with black as well. Black is my foreground color. Option Delete. Command D to deselect. That is now the skin mask. Now, you'll see a couple of anomalies in here. If you actually take a look, there's a shoulder in here that's pretty fucked up. There's hair in here which is fucked up, you think, but this is actually the way it should look. And then there's another anomaly right over here on this shoulder over in here. We can get rid of the anomalies, not the ones that are in the hair, but the shoulder ones we can get rid of because they're clearly not part of the skin. So to get rid of them, hit the B key to get a brush. Make sure it is a normal brush. 100% hard, completely hard. Make your flow 100% opacity. And then you're simply, it's a much smaller brush, going to paint out the lines that are on that shoulder right there, and then the other one that's on the other side. You need to get rid of all of that. And then there's also a weird little thing that's right in the middle here. Make my brush a little bit smaller. Get rid of that part. I think I want this darker part to actually be darker, so I'm going to go to an overlay brush really quickly just to make that a little bit more solid. Double click on the hand and see how we did. So again, I'm going to come over to, I've got my hair mask is actually showing. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to turn on the sweater. I'm going to turn on the blue background. And what am I missing here? Oh, the skin. I don't have the skin yet. So again, I'm going to make another copy of my new version. Command J. I'm going to drag it all the way to the very top of my image. I'm going to double click on it and call it skin. I'm going to come over to my skin selection. Oh wait, we can do more refining on that. the skin isn't going to have any of this feathery hair at all. I can paint all of that out black as well. So again, B key to get the brush, just to finish cleaning this up. It can be a normal brush. It should be completely hard brush so that we don't overspray into anything else. And I'm simply going to run it down here and get rid of all that hair. And the same thing on this top part over here. I'm going to overlay this because I don't want to paint onto her fingers. So we'll overlay this, again, black. And that part's good. Go back to a normal brush. Zoom back out and paint through all of this. Or hit the L key to get the lasso tool and just circle all of that and fill it with black. Option delete, Command D to deselect. Now I've got my skin mask, and I'm going to, again, Command click to load this as a selection, come over to my skin layer and add it as a layer mask. Turn it on, and so this is my image, and this is the reconstructed image of it all. At this point, you should save your work because this is your homework. We just did the entire fucker. Now, I do have issues right here. You can see where we actually did the transition from hair to skin. It's not perfect. The transition from skin to blue background is actually pretty good. However, you will see there's areas, actually the transition on that shoulder is pretty good, but here you'll actually see this little white line that's coming around here. These things are to be expected because of the way Photoshop deals with transparency. So these edges that are coming right in here are slightly soft, and that was deliberate on our part. You don't want this stuff to look like it's been cut out. That's why we did so much of that edge feathering and all of that kind of stuff. So because you have transparency, the way Photoshop works transparency is you would think, well, here, we can actually see. How can I do this? How can I do this? How can I do this? Let me try something really quick. I'll talk about dovetailing later because we've got a lot of other stuff that I want to get through today, and this is sort of a minor issue, especially since the fact that I told you these little edges are actually designed and meant to be there. This is by design. This is how Photoshop deals with transparency. You would think if you had a 50% transparency on top of a 50% transparency, it would be 100%. That's not how Photoshop sees it. Photoshop sees it as actually 50% of 50%, which would then ultimately be 75%, not 100%. But again, I will show you that, guys. We can actually deal with that part next week. But this is a fairly impressive way to actually rebuild this, to see how well our selections are actually made in here. But now let's really do something with this, because this is the reason you go to all the trouble to build this shit. So I'm going to turn off all the selections that we just made. So all these sort of separate knockouts that we just made. I'm going to get rid of the color fill. I'm going to do one last new version copy of this. Actually, I take it back. I'm going to do another copy of that. Command J. I'm just going to leave it as new version copy, but I'm going to drag it all the way up to the top. And so I'm going to start with my blue background knockout. So I'm going to click on my blue background knockout to load it as a selection. So Command click loads it as a selection. And I'm going to come over to this new version copy, and I'm actually going to add a layer mask. So this is added a layer mask. You don't see anything because it hasn't been turned on. I'm actually going to turn this thing on, and then I'm going to invert this because what I want to do is just change the background. So I'm going to invert this mask, Command I. So I've inverted the mask, but everybody has a problem with that blue edge. It's hard to see the blue edge, so I'm going to go right underneath it. I've selected the skin layer right underneath it. I'm going to put a new white background in it, so I'm going to select solid color. And again, because you've got the color picker up, if your background and foreground colors are at their default, you can simply use the eyedropper to click on the white. It's a quicker, faster way to get there and say OK to that. So now we've got spill. This is the issue that everybody looks at and says, OK, man, you know, got that all spill. I don't believe this. This has totally been on some other background, blah, 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 blah. So is everybody at this point, because my next move here has got nothing to do with making selections. This is how we deal with spill. Are we all good?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think.
let's do this again.
Wait, I think Mari is not. No, oh.
It's okay, thank you.
Wait, did you say you're just over it?
No,
Oh, okay.
he's going over it.
Oh, going over it. Okay, we need a new copy of the Virgin at the bottom. Okay, so select it, Command J. Okay, we're going to drag that all the way to the top. So we've got a new Virgin at the very top, correct? Yes. Okay, I'm going to put the white layer between these two first before I knock it out. Okay, so select on the layer just underneath it, whatever that layer is. And then go to your Add Adjustment Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers palette, and we're going to add a solid color. We good? The dialog opens up. You can type in 255R, 255 green, or 255 blue, or use the eyedropper to come over and select. If you have one of your foreground colors is either white or black, you can simply go over there and select it and say OK. So now I've got a white background with a copy of the Virgin on top, and it looks just like the original image does. Everybody good on this? Come over to your Channels palette, and in your Channels palette, you will have a blue background. Do not select the blue background channel. Just hover over the icon, hold down the Command key, and click. It will load the blue background as a selection. Come over to your Layers palette and select the very top layer now, the one that's got the image, the new Virgin copy, and then click on the icon that's the square with the black circle in the middle to add a layer mask. And what we've now got is a mask that's hiding the figure and showing the background. I need to invert that. I want to show the figure and hide the background. So just hit Command I, inverts the mask. And we should have a figure on a white background with this horrible blue spill. Everybody good on this part? Great. Yes? That's because you're on this layer right here. So come up to this top layer. Start with just Command D, just to make sure you don't have a selection going. Good. Come over here, hover over the icon. Don't select it, just hover over the icon, hold down Control, and click. No, sorry, I'm sorry, Command, not Control, sorry. Come over, so this is selected. You want to simply add a layer mask. So this is now showing the background, not the figure. So your mask is still selected. Hit Command I to invert it. There you go. We still got a problem on that shoulder. Okay. Spill. So to fix this, the mask is controlling what we see. So this is a destructive move. I need everybody to be aware of this. Again, I've got a new Virgin that's sitting all the way down here that is untouched other than the hair fix that I did on it. And I've got the original images sitting at the very bottom. What we are going to do now is a destructive move. It's okay because I'm going to get rid of the spill. But again, do not think you can do this on your only copy of this. If you only had one copy of that new Virgin, this move is completely destructive, and I'll show you why that is. So to do this, to fix it, I'm going to go all the way to the very top. You need to select the pixel layer, the pixel part of that layer now. So we're selecting the image. We're going to hit the B key to get a brush. You need to make sure that this is a completely soft brush. We're going to change the blending mode from normal all the way down to color. And what color does is that it will actually respect the luminosity of your image, but change the color of it. So it's like that whole model, LEB model that we were talking about. This is going to change the color content, but leave the luminosity alone. And to see what that looks like, I want you to just hover over the some of the hair. We need to paint with hair color. So I need to sample hair color. So there's two ways of doing it. The first is you can click on the color picker and open it up, and then simply use the eyedropper tool to click on the color of her hair, and you'll see it makes it a sort of a very dark gray, and you say, okay. And that part works great, but that takes too long to do that. So an easier way to do it is while you have a brush selected, simply hold down your Option key and you temporarily get the color picker and click on it, and you will get another color. If you hit the wrong color when you try this, hold down the Option key, click. If this is the wrong color, you can move around your image and you'll see the top half of your image is what your color will ultimately be. So if you feel like you need something that's a little bit darker, just move around till you get something a little bit darker and then let go, and that's the color that will now be your foreground color. So what I said about this respecting the luminosity of your image, I want to start on her face. This is going to be a complete mistake, but on her face, I just want you to paint over her eye. And you'll see what happens is that it changes the color of this figure to the color we picked, but the luminosity of the image remains intact. We did not change the luminosity. Hit Command Z to undo that. I'm going to show you what the difference would be. If you go back up to a normal blending mode and do the same thing, you end up painting this across this. You not only change the color, you also change the luminosity. We don't want to do that. We want to simply change the color. So Command Z to undo that. Back to our color blending mode. Make your brush much larger. I'm going to go to the F key so I can get to the paste board because I want to be able to paint in the top. You only want to paint on the areas that need fixing. Do not get into the habit. Lazy people will come in here with a brush and just start whacking the shit out of this hair. The problem that you run into with that is that you change things that didn't need to be changed, and if you do it long enough and bad enough, it's obvious what you've done. So I'm going to make my brush even a little bit larger, and I'm simply going to start painting over the blue part of her hair and kiss the spill goodbye. I'm holding down the space bar to temporarily get the hand. When you get down close to her fingers, you need to go to a completely hard brush, because if you don't, look what happens on my screen. Don't do this. If I come down here to paint this part, if you paint across her hand, you end up changing the color of her skin to gray, which is wrong. So Command Z to undo that. Go to a completely hard brush so that you can get the line that runs right along her hand. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to get rid of this spill right here. Make my brush even smaller to get rid of the spill that's in between all of her fingers. And then finally, you can see I fucked up right there, that edge of her finger. So I can actually fix that. I'm going to hold down the Option key to sample skin tone and then paint back along the edge of her finger that actually I hit with that gray paint. And then finally, zip back out. We need to go to the other side because there's spill on the other hair that's over here. Again, a little bit larger brush. Hold down the Option key, sample another color over here, and get rid of the spill that's there. And then finally, you'll see there's a digital error. There's two little dots in there that are purple that are right in this area. I'm simply going to paint across those so that you don't know that's what it is. And then she's actually got a glow of spill that's on her skin right here. So I'm going to make my brush even smaller. I'm going to sample the color of her skin, which is a much darker brown. It's not that black. And I'm going to paint through that, although that looks like that was hair. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Sample the color of her hair and run along the line that I think is, yeah, that's much better. But I still have spill on her skin, so I'm sampling a dark color of that skin and running down here along the whole part that is actually along this edge. That's, again, it's all spill. It's coming from the blue background. And there's even more that's sitting right there. And I can get rid of that part. I do have a little blue edge that's actually happening here. So I'm going to again sample the yellow of the sweater. And I'm going to change this part. And you can see it ends up being like almost too strong of a line. It almost looks like it's like jumping out at me. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And I'm going to drop my opacity down to 50% and hit that line again. And it brings it in much better and much more believable. And gets rid of the spill on that side, and then I've got it on the other shoulder as well. So again, I'm going to sample now the white and actually deal with the spill. It's still at a 50%, so that's wrong. I'm going to bring it back up to 100% on here and paint this again. And you can see that it actually then, I don't know, that seems a little bit more obvious. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I'll go back to my 50%. Or 60% and bring this in slowly. And then when I get down to the sweater again, I need to go back to my yellow as my color. So, girl with no spill. Now, for those of you who have ever done any of this kind of work right before this, whatever, your fucking little heart should be pitter-pattering right now. Thumping at a miles an hour, a million miles an hour. Look at the work you've done. I'll say this again, I've said it before, this is not a $9.50 an hour retoucher. This is a $2,000 a day retoucher. But Verser, let's do something else. Can't we do more with this? I mean, we've been doing this all day. Can't we actually do something more exciting about this? Yes, we can. Glad you asked. So I'm going to come over to my channels palette, and I'm simply going to load the sweater selection. Command click. Loads it as a selection. I'm back to my layers palette, and I'm going to go to the top of my layers palette, and I'm actually going to do selective color again. And it's going to pick, well, mine picked a color yellow, and it's because of the color yellow that we had actually picked before. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the yellow color. If you want the same color that I've got, it's a 242 red, a 224 green, and a 141 blue, and just say OK to that. Yeah?
You make a new select, like a new layer.
I just loaded the selection of the sweater.
So you made a new layer with that selection?
I'll show you, hang on. So I'm back over to my sweater channel. Holding down the Command key, click just loads it as a selection. Now when I add an adjustment layer that's a solid color, it'll actually put that selection on as a layer mask. It just saves me a whole step. And again, mine's very yellow, so I'm going to say OK to this. It's yellow, right? And everybody looks at it. So this could possibly be an interesting color blocking thing. So I'm just going to call this my fucking art. I'm going to come up with some lame artist statement to justify why I was so lazy in doing this, print it really big, because that's how fine art is, and sell a billion copies of it and retire rich and famous. Or not. See, if I did that, then I would have to leave all of you behind, and that would kill me. Speaking of that, did everybody get on the sign-in list? However, we can be much more clever about this. We can change the blending mode of this solid color from normal down to colored, just like what we did before. And all of a sudden now we've completely changed the color of the sweater. Although the color of the sweater when we started out was already yellow. So it doesn't seem like it's that much of a difference, right? But double click now on the solid color, the little icon that is that solid color. It will open the color picker up again, and you can simply sit there and drag it to make it a purple or a blue or an orange or a red. Now, if you look at this and you say, well, that's really pretty cool, but it seems a little nylon-y. I mean, neon-y. It's a little bit, it's a little bit intense, right? We can click on the brightness slider, and we can actually drag the slider down to make it a little bit richer. If we feel like it's still too intense, like, oh my God, that's this girl would never wear a sweater like that. This is for her 3-year-old niece. You can click on the saturation and drop the saturation part of this down again and say OK to this. And all of a sudden, in no time at all, I've changed the yellow sweater to a pink one. And I can do infinite number of colors. Yes? Yeah, so here, I'll start it from the beginning. So come over, the first thing you do is make the selection. So load the selection. So just hover over the icon of your sweater to load it. And then we're going to add a solid color adjustment layer on top of that. It will put the mask on for you. And at this point, I've got basically a yellow color in here. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. But then change the blending mode of this layer from normal down to color. And it will then, it's like a color wash overlay on top of it. So if you then double click on the solid color, you've got a field up here that if you've got, there's a little circle in it, you can click this and drag it around and it shows you your results in real time. So you can make this thing any sort of color you want. I actually like the sort of like the blue one, seems a little bit better to me. Again, I think it's a little oversaturated. This seems like a really intense color. So if I click the little saturation radio button, I can actually drop the saturation of this down to make it sort of more believable and sort of say okay with that. And again, you're sort of off to the races. I can do the same thing with her hair. I'm going to come over and command click to load her hair as a selection. I'm going to also add another solid color layer on top of that. It's going to pick, again, it always picks your foreground color. I'm going to pick something that's more in the reds. We'll start out here and see what it looks like. Change its blending mode to color. And that's really a pretty intense red. That's sort of like, oh, whew, man, that's going a little hard there. So to lessen the effect, simply drop the opacity of this layer down. And so all of a sudden now I've changed the color of this girl's hair. And look at the selection. We were all worried about that skin tone transition. Do you guys see it? It looks flawless. Yeah, no. Are there questions about this? Right? You don't like the way the background looks? I've already got that guy masked out. Double click on the color solid. So we picked white. Double click on the color solid layer. We just need to pick some color in here. I'm going to bump that up to the reds. That seems, again, a little extreme red to me. So I'm going to grab the saturation slider and drop it down, make it something that's a little bit more palatable. All right? Say OK to that. Now I've actually gone from a blue, it's almost inverted. I've gone from a blue to a red in the background. And look at the quality of this. You find where this looks cut out. Oh yeah, once you get the selections made, guys, you can do fucking anything. Are there questions about this? Yes?
You can't yell though.
I won't.
Can you go back to the skin selection?
Sure. To what part?
Where you, I think I know how you did it, like where you were in the channels and you selected everything,
Yeah. So how you build the skin selection. So let's go back to, we'll just go back to a regular image here with nothing else. So to build the skin, you've got everything but the skin. This is like a jigsaw puzzle. You've got everything but the skin. So I'm simply going to start with a brand new layer. I'm going to call this skin 2. It needs to be white because it's just easier to start with white because I want the skin to show. So I'm just going to invert this so it's white. Then I'm going to load everybody else and just fill it with black. So I'm going to come up to the hair and I'll start with this. I'm going to hover over the hair, command click, loads it as a selection. Black is my foreground color. Option delete fills it with black. Command D to deselect.
What fills it?
If black is your foreground color, it's option delete. If you guys can't remember those shortcuts, just go up to the edit menu and come down to fill, and you can fill with, again, your drop-down menu, black, white, 50% gray, whatever. Just pick black and say OK, and it'll fill it with black.
I feel like I'm doing something wrong. What did you do? Wait. So I'm in the skin.
So turn everything else off. Go down to your very bottom layer. Turn everything else off because all this other color can get really confusing.
Oh, type shit. Okay, I got you now. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, but all you want to be looking is that bottom channel. So go all the way down to the bottom channel.
Right here?
No, channel. That's layers.
Oh, I'm tripping.
That's all right. I know, it's a long day.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't look like we have anything yet. I would hit Command Z to undo that. No, I would hit Command Z because I think you've done that on a layer.
Okay.
Okay, so go to the bottom of your channels, hit Command D to deselect. Go to the bottom of your channels palette, click on that little square with the plus in the middle at the very bottom, and rename that skin.
And this is what we're inverting.
Right, invert that, Command I, and then go up into your channels palette and find your skin selection, or any of them. Command click on that. That loads it as a selection. You need to fill that with black. Black is your foreground color, so hit Option Delete.
Okay.
Hit Command D to deselect. Go find the hair, Command click. You need to fill that, Option Delete. Hit Command D to deselect. Find the background, Command click. Fill that with black, Option Delete. Command D to deselect. And then you just need to refine that.
Okay.
Again, we got rid of the hair, we got rid of the shoulder, but it's essentially the skin. That's what's left.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, when we make our mask selection and everything, once we get to this point and we want to refine the mask even more, say like, I'm noticing that I can select like a lot of those individual hairs by her face. How would I go back and like refine that?
Okay, no, it's a great question. So basically the question is, once you get in here and you get into this deep and you're looking at something, you're saying, okay, wow, this doesn't seem quite right to me, or here, let's look at the skin mask again. We're gonna look at this guy by itself. So again, if I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, well, you know, I feel like this a little too much hair is up here. I need to refine this guy. There's too much hair that's going up in here. You can actually hold down the Option key and click on your mask, and you can see where the problem is. It's right here. So hit the B key to get a brush, and in this case I would make it again an overlay brush, because what I need to do is I need to make this darker so that it's hidden. Make sure it's a soft brush, because again, this is a very soft edge right here. And then my brush a little bit larger. I'm going to go ahead and leave this opacity at 53%, or I'll crank the opacity up and bring my flow down. So I'll bring my flow down to like a 15. And then I can simply come in here and I can start painting on this, and you can see it's actually darkening that up. The problem that I've got is that I can't see this in real time. I can see what's happening to the mask, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo it. You can actually turn on the whole layer so that you can see what's going on, but make sure that the mask is what is selected. And now when I actually do this, you can actually see that it's digging out a little bit more of what was part of that skin. Make sense?
And then how would I bring it out there? So say,
How do you do what?
how do I select more instead of
So yeah, so let's say right down here, if you feel like this has been ghosted out too much right in here, hit the X key, so you're going to be painting with white, and then start to scrub in on this guy, and you can see it's starting to bring it back in. Make sense? But a note for everybody, if you do this kind of work like this, I just refined this hair mask a little bit. You need to save the revised version of this. So again, you go into your channels palette, find the hair mask that is sitting right here on this layer, make a copy of it, and then you need to rename this, and I would call this Hair Version 2 or Hair Revised, because you've worked on that selection, and if you don't save that as a discrete channel, then it only lives in your layer mask, and you can get really confused because your layer mask is different. That hair mask on the layer is now different than the channel that made it is. And so you save a revision of it. Some people will throw away the original one and just save the revised one. I don't do that, because if I want to go back in space, it's easy for me to go back if I don't do it that way. Okay. If you hit the F key again, you should go to the black pasteboard, F key again. I don't know why this is not doing anything. F key again, F key again. To get back to, make sure that you save your file one last time and close it up. And that is not all of your homework, but some of your homework. So, really quickly, I've got something to show you guys, and then we might try one last thing. But so far, Are there questions about this? Are you guys maybe, hopefully, I pray, feeling a little bit better about this whole process? Yes, no? Practice makes perfect, so, keep going after this stuff. Again, change your life. Okay, I want to show you really quickly, because part of the homework coming up is, I think it's this week, you need to start thinking about your final project. And your final project for this class is going to be your work. I want this, do not think that the best move for your final project is to turn in either my files or somebody else's files, whatever. This is something that should really apply to your work. If you're going to invest your time in the way you should in this class, in doing these things, it should apply to stuff that you can use in your portfolio, stuff that will actually, when you graduate from here, is going to help you. So don't come here and show up and say, yeah, I did all this retouching for a friend of mine. I hate these pictures. I don't want to do this work again, but I'm doing it for your final. That's just a waste of your time. And I don't want that. I want this to be, I want your final to benefit you. I want it to be, okay, I use this to do this. And, it needs to be the stuff that you've gone through in this class. It doesn't have to be everything, because we're going to cover a lot. You don't have to composite if you don't do compositing in your work, but maybe you need to, I don't know, replace that window or change that tire, or whatever it is, So I need you to be thinking about what it is you're going to do for your final project. So if we look at our Canvas site really quick. So we are in week number 5. And so assignment 3.1, you have done. And if you did it and followed me, you're going to get a good grade on that. Number 2, there is another image that you need to knock out. So if we read this, it's going to be knock out using blah, 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 blah. We haven't gone through one of these things. It's going to be the last thing we get to today, but I want to make sure that you see this other part. Add a white background and use the most successful knock to choke the images. We're going to look at choke and spread here really quickly in just 1 second. So that's that. Your written final project proposal. So you have, I think, I don't know, October 11th, a week to do this. It's only 2 paragraphs. So the first paragraph is the conceptual part of your proposal. What is it that you're actually going to do? The second part is the logistic part about it. So you just need to put together a simple PDF. It always helps if you include some images to sort of describe what it is you think you might do. Now, you can completely change your mind by the end of the semester, but I want you to start thinking about this now. The last thing in the world I want to happen is to get 2 weeks out from the end of the semester and you think, fuck, I don't have any idea what I'm going to do and I need to start figuring this out now. This is a process to get things started. We will look at it. We will talk about it. You'll get input from the class about your idea. You might refine it. It might evolve. All those things can happen, but I need you to start thinking about it now. Make sense? To that end, I want to show you just a few examples of work that's actually happened in this class before, to give you some idea that it is not necessary. It's not this, again, I said this in the very beginning, this is not a fashion and beauty class. So just to give you some idea of some of the work that's actually been done in this class before, and I'm not going to go through and explain a whole lot because I want to try to actually get going. Come on. To show you guys just a couple of examples of what's happening here. So here was a person who did this sort of really kind of bizarre a 2D impact on architecture. Here's a guy who did a whole series of compositing. He created these buildings and put them into these spaces. So you can see some of these a little more successful than others, but this is all completely composited. This is not, the building isn't real. The stuff in the foreground is not real. This has all been put in. So again, I'm just throwing some ideas out there that are not sort of that conventional thing. These were a conventional set of composites. So this is the ultimate composite. This is what it was actually brought from. So you can see that there are people who are doing compositing work. Again, this was a little bit more fashion oriented. This was a guy who was really into doing these insane constructions. So this is a composite of like 30 images. It's a real ambulance interior. All the figures were then shot in the studio. I mean, all of this stuff. So again, not fashion, not beauty, certainly. These were these sort of like weird, sort of amorphic kind of, again, sort of more, I don't know. Food, again, this was all obviously composited to do this kind of work here. Worked out really well. So much easier than trying to put that together. You know the moose that's on the wall back there? This is the guy who actually shot it, Jacob Watts. He was really into doing these sort of like posters that were all about war and children. And so it was this whole like series of things, these posters that he actually did. So again, this is like completely, you know, this was just a very different thing, but it gave him the tools, this class gave him the tools to really sort of like pull this stuff off. These were these incredibly weird, this is all synthetic. He's created all these forms and all of these shapes and then actually done them to sort of like make them these weird Escher-esque twists on perspective. So you see all this like weird shit like this. They were really well done. Jeff O'Keefe, the guy who's actually in the studio right now, he actually took these are pieces of foam core that he just photographed, so white foam core, and then he goes in and digitally wraps images around this foam core. I helped him work on this stuff. This was the most difficult, one of the most difficult things I've ever seen anybody try to do, and they were beautiful. I mean, they were stunning. Anyway. Day to night. So he was interested in shooting images in the daytime and the nighttime and then sort of like blending them together in sort of a single photograph. Some of them a little more obvious, a little less obvious. I think the less obvious ones actually were a little bit more successful. This girl, I'm actually going to open one of these up because she did architecture. We used to own the Johnson Publish Company building. And when they first bought it, people had access to it. So this was her final image. And you think of it, well, so big deal, you know, who cares? Look at this layer stack. This is insanity. This is where it all started. And you look at it and you say, well, what's the big deal, right? Well, she's turning on lights. She's doing, look at this corner up here. You want to talk about a retouching challenge? Try taking the glass that is broken out of the track and push it back in, and then add the reflection. I mean, again, this, you look at this, if it's, I say this to everybody, if your retouching is really, really well done, nobody knows. A couple more, and then hopefully we've got time for choke and spread. I think we do. Yeah, so Josh's stuff here, I'll just show you one. This is more conventional beauty. This is what he was really into doing. And this is his before and after. So think about your work and what you can do using the skill set that you're developing in this class. Anticipate what where we're going next. Those sorts of things. Do you have some way that you can actually impact your work doing this and end up with something? Hopefully, again, I am so about your portfolio, you can't believe it, because that is your ticket. Are there questions about this? Okay. I want to try one last thing really quickly because, yes. So a minimum of 5, but then it depends on the amount of work that you're really doing. So If you're doing really serious, intense, a lot of work on every image, 5, great. If you're doing minor retouching, 15. But everyone in this room knows what a final is and what one isn't. Okay, we need to do this quickly, so I need everybody to do this with me because I'm going to blow through this in 20 minutes. It's going to be a little bit on the fast side, but I want to show you a couple of tricks and a couple of things that we need that are going to impact your homework because you're going to need to do these for your homework. So if you go into your student folder from week number 5, there is a folder inside of there. It's another one of my folders. This 20100815_ver_urban_02. Inside of that are 2 images. It's a green screen, girl on green screen. Select both of those images and then either drag them on top of Photoshop or just hit Command O to open them. It did not look like that happened to me. And you should have a picture of a girl on a green background. Everybody good? Okay, so you need to start with the image that's got the color card in it because we can use that to color balance. So select the white balance tool, the little eyedropper that's under on the basic panel. Click on that, come over to the card, and you want to click on the gray right next to the red patch, and it will color balance this. It puts in a lot of warmth. It makes it a color neutral. That is correct. Come over to the thumbnail now, and if you hover over the thumbnail, if your thumbnails are along the bottom, it'll still work on the bottom. Hover over the thumbnail and you will get 3 little dots in the top right-hand corner. Click on those 3 little dots, and in the menu that flies out, do a select all. It will just select the other image as well. Go right back to those same 3 little dots on the thumbnail that has got the color card in it and come down to sync settings. And then simply hit OK, because all we wanted to do was apply the color from the card to the image that does not have the card in it. And then select the image that does not have the card in it. So this is the image that doesn't have the card in it, and go ahead and open this as an object. Okay, girl on green, and I want to knock this out. So the way we've been dealing with this before would be to actually look at the channels first. And if I look at the channel, at the red channel here, it's not helping me out. It's not a good place to start. If I look at the green channel, it's actually better, but it's not really great around her face because it's a tonal issue right here. And even though that green is really different in color than her face, we can't really leverage it here. And then finally, there's a blue channel at the bottom, which is worthless to me at all. So I'm not really gung-ho on using any of those methods to do this. So I do a lot of green screen work. I have a $500 program to knock green screens out. I don't use it anymore. I use what I'm going to show you right now. How many of these people in the room have ever built an action in Photoshop? So if you're going to do repetitive work in Photoshop, you want to do it with actions because that way you don't have to do the repetitive work all over again. So we are going to not only do the stuff to knock this out, but we're going to do it as an action so that you simply need to click on this action for the rest of your life and it'll do the heavy lifting for you. Make sense? So here's how to do it. Go to your actions palette first. Click on the little menu, 3 little lines, menu lines that are to the right of that. You'll get a flyout menu and you want to do new action. It's going to give you an opportunity to name this. You want to call this 0 selective color. I just do select colors. C-O-L-O-R. And then we're going to hit record. And now what Photoshop is going to do is just going to follow whatever we do. We don't need to code shit. It's just going to watch what we do and it's going to build it into an action. So this is what you do. We're going to add an adjustment layer on top of this. So come over to the adjustment layer at the bottom, click on that, and you want to add a hue saturation layer. We good? Come right back down. We're going to add a second adjustment layer on top of that. And the one you want to do is selective color. It's the one that's at the very bottom. It's not solid color. It's not color or anything else. It's selective color. This is critical. And it will actually put a selective color up in your properties panel. Does everybody have selective color in the top with a little thing that says reds in the drop-down menu? The only thing we're changing in here is the black slider. We don't touch any of the other sliders. First off, is the radio button for absolute selected or is it relative? If it's relative, select absolute. Then drag the black slider for these reds all the way to the right, a plus 100%. In the colors, it's a drop-down menu. You need to come down to the yellows. It's the very next one down. Drag the black slider all the way to the right. You need to do this for every single thing in that drop-down menu. The greens are next. Drag the slider all the way to the right. The cyans are next. Drag the slider all the way to the right. Only black. The blues, slider all the way to the right. The magentas, the slider all the way to the right. The whites, which are really the highlights of this image. This is a very old tool in Photoshop, so this is before they got savvy about their naming. Drag it all the way to the right. The neutrals, which are the midtones, black slider all the way to the right. And then finally the blacks, black slider all the way to the right. And you should have a black image. Did anybody come up with like a solarized looking image, or does everybody have a black image? Okay, good. You need to then end the recording of this action. If you come over to your actions palette, you'll see there's a little red button that shows that you're recording. There's a square just to the left of that little red button. Click on that and your action has now been made. It's sitting in here. It's called Zero Selective Color. There's a little drop-down menu that opens it up. You don't need to keep that open. That's just the steps that we made. You can click on that to collapse it, but it's sitting right here. So everybody can find their Zero Selective Color action, correct? I want you to throw away both of those adjustment layers, and we need to make sure your action works. So click on the Zero Selective Color action to make it active, and then underneath on the bottom of your action palette, the arrow that's pointing to the right plays the action. And you should end up with this, and your image should be black. But mine's not black. It's actually solarized, and that's because it gets confused about this relative absolute radio button. If your image is black, you're fine. If your image is solarized like mine, simply click on the absolute radio button and it will be black.
Wait, how do I? Oh, never mind.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Is this good for everybody? Okay. So now what we're going to do is click on your drop-down color menu. Make sure you've got your selective color is the adjustment layer that's selected. Come up to the greens and grab your black slider that's all the way to the right and drag it all the way to the left. So what we're doing in this, when we drag all of those lines over to fill with black, fill with black, fill with black, what we're saying to Photoshop is take the reds and fill everything that Photoshop considers to be red, fill it with 100% black. And do the same thing with the greens, the blues, the cyans, the magentas, yellows, the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. We filled everything with black, and that's why we have a black image. Now we're going in and saying on the greens, I don't want you to fill it with black. Actually, we're going to go the opposite way. I want you to fill it with white. White is an ink in Photoshop because it's mathematical. So we have now filled this with white ink. If you then click on the hue saturation layer that's underneath it and zoom into this girl's hair, so you can see this is a much better, again, the beginning of a mask, this is much better for us than any of those channels were. But we can make it better because if the green that we've got in here is not a pure green. If it was a pure green, this background would be white. It's not a pure green, but we can make it more pure by saturating the green. To do that, click on the targeting adjustment tool. It's the little tool that sits up right next to, it's at the very top, looks like a hand with two little arrows. If you click on that and come over onto your image, you should have an icon that looks like an eyedropper.
I don't have
If you clicked on the hue saturation adjustment layer,
it. Yes.
and up at the very top, you don't see the little hand.
Oh, I'm on the. Okay, that's it.
So make sure that the hue saturation layer is active. And at the very top in the properties panel, you should see a little hand.
Click the whole thing. That's why I didn't do it. I clicked just the.
Oh, so you're clicking the one to the left?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The hand is
Yeah. Okay, that's the targeting adjustment tool. What it will do is it will pick the color of green for you. Now, for us, we see this image as black and white, but because the saturation, the selective color is on top, I'm going to turn it off right now just so that you can see what happens. Again, I've got the little eyedropper. If I click and drag to the right, it saturates my color. If I go to the left, it desaturates my color. So I want to go to the right to saturate it as much as I can, but look what's happening to this girl's hair. So I'm going to set my saturation back to 0. You can type it in to undo anything. We need to watch this with the eyeball of the selective color on. So I've just turned this on. I'm working with my hue saturation layer, and I'm simply going to click on this and start to drag. And what I need to avoid, you can see how some of this hair is starting to go white. It's actually starting to get lighter. That's saturating the color too much. You need to back this off. So I'm going to still use the targeting adjustment tool, and I'm going to bring it back down so that I don't get any of that white haloing in her hair. And there's sometimes where you come all the way back down to 0, and if that's the case, that's fine. But I don't want to hit this any harder than this, or you get weird halos in her hair. So in this case, I can't really saturate the image at all. In some cases, you can saturate it quite a bit, and to just make for a more effective beginning for your knockout. Are we good on that part? So then all I need to do is all of my RGB channels are all identical. I'm simply going to copy the blue one. I'm just going to grab the blue one, drag it down to the, so I'm in my channels palette. I'm grabbing the blue channel, just dragging it down to the little square with the plus inside. I'm going to double click on it and call it knockout. And say OK. And then I'm going to throw away my adjustment layers. They've done their work. I don't need them anymore. I've got my knockout that's sitting right here, and then we're going to go through the same steps that we go through in doing any of our knockouts, the stuff we did today. If you look at her, her right arm, you can actually see there's some tone in that right arm, so that's where I'm going to set one of my sample points. So I'm going to go up to my eyedropper tool and come down to color sampler tool. And I'm going to drop 1 point on as light an area of that sleeve as I can really find. So I'm going to drop 1 point there, and then I'm going to kick another point out on the background. I'm going to change both of my readouts to give me RGB readouts. This is exactly what we did in the beginning of today. And I've got a relatively good distance between the two. We'll see how this goes. Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. And the first one I'm going to go after is the white point. And I'm just going to keep dragging it all the way back till I get close to 255. I'm at 254. I'm going to go to my arrow keys and tap it in to get 255. And I'm going to grab my black point and go in the other direction until I get close to 0. Go to my arrow keys and tap that in. Recheck your 255 and make sure you're okay there. I've got a little sparkle that's on the edge of this. I don't care about that too much. I really care about the edge of her hair. So I'm coming up to the edge to see her hair in my image. I'm going to use my preview check mark to come on and off. And I'm feeling like I'm keeping enough of those fine little hairs in there that I'm good to go, that this will be a believable knockout. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out. And this is the beginning of my knockout. And how much easier was that? Right? I've got a problem on the floor. To fix the floor, you would use the pen tool around her shoes and then knock out the rest of this. But we're not going to do that right now because I've got other things I want to show you. But does this sort of make sense where we're at on all of this? So let's see how well we did. Again, this is inverted, so we need to invert it to show the body and hide the background. Hit Command I to invert it. We can take a look. You'll see that there's a couple of things like the edge that I was talking to you about. There's contamination in this. So again, I would hit the B key to get a brush. I would change it to overlay. What is my foreground color? And I would get rid of, I'm going to drag my flow all the way up so it happens quicker. I would clean all these things up. But this is all work that we've done before. We just spent all this time doing this stuff. So again, I would clean all that up. You would need to look around. But so once we get this whole thing clean, let's find out how well it works. So I'm going to go back to my layers palette. I'm going to add a solid color above this. I'm going to make it white. Again, my background color is white, so I can actually tap it with my eyedropper tool. I'm going to go back to my original layer and make a duplicate of it, Command J. I'm going to drag it above the white. I'm going to Control click on my knockout. Command click on my knockout and apply it as a layer mask and see how we did. And so you can see I've got spill, which I would have to fix, but I've got a pretty fucking impressive knockout done here really quickly. Wouldn't you guys agree? So there is a thing in your assignment that talks about choking and spreading this. We are not going to have time to get to choke and spread, so I'm not going to do choke and spread, but I am going to show you one final trick about this. But did this work for everybody who actually did it? Okay, this is a smart object, and I can't actually, for the smart object, I can't paint on the smart object. So I can't get rid of the spill on the smart object. Now, I could rasterize this image. So to do that, I would again make sure that this is selected right here, come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize. And if you do that, it turns it into a normal layer and I can paint on it. I've still got my smart object down here at the bottom, which is fine. So this would be the way that I would actually go about doing that. And then again, the B key to get a brush. I'm going to zoom in here to her hair. Change my blending mode of my brush to color. Make my brush a little bit larger. 100% opacity, 100% flow, a completely soft brush. Mine is. I'm going to come over here to her hair. I'm going to hold down the Option key to sample that color, and then even a little bit larger brush. Paint out the spill that's on that side of her head. Come up here to the top and get that part as well. Resample the darker color that's on the other side to remove the spill that's on that side. I'm going to zoom in here tight. She's got a glow that's on the side of her face. I'm going to hold down the Option key and sample the darker tone of her skin. I'm going to make this a medium hard brush, sort of blend it into what's going on in the hair in the background part. Much smaller brush. Again, you only want to paint the area that's got the spill in it. You don't want to fuck with the area that's actually good. I think this brush is going to be a little too strong. If you start it out like this and you paint down, you can see it's a little too strong. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead either drop your flow or drop your opacity. But if you knock your opacity down to like 50%, it hits it pretty well. If it doesn't hit it hard enough the first go around, hit it a second time and it'll get rid of it. And we need to get rid of it. It's underneath her chin. I need to resample this area over here underneath her chin. It's got that out pretty well. She's got spill in the sweater, you can see. So again, Option Delete to pick up that and get rid of all that color. I'm going to make my brush larger and get rid of all the spill that's in there. My opacity is still at 40%, so change that. Make sure you get this part. I'm picking up a lot of color in this that I don't really like in here, so I'm going to undo that, resample something a little bit darker, and that ends up being better. It's a little bit more neutral in color. And take care of removing all the spill, and you're off to the races. Are there questions about this? How nice was that, right? $500 program, you guys just got something that's better. I've got 2 minutes to show you one thing, and not that this really matters, but I do just want to show you this just really quickly so that you can see that it's not just about using that action to do knockouts like this. So I want you to hold down the Shift key to just kill the mask so we can see this is what I meant about this being destructive. Look at what's happened to the layer. That's my spill removal. But again, with the mask on, you don't know that that exists, right? Okay, so, but just to, we can go ahead and do it here. I want you to run your zero action, zero selective color one more time. So just in your actions palette, run it a second time. Again, I get a version that looks like it's solarized, so I'm going to hit absolute. Again, this gets me back to everything is black on here. Instead of picking the greens, I want you to come down to the whites and grab the whites and drag your black slider all the way to the left. This is the highlights of your image. Make a copy of the blue layer. I mean the blue channel, not the blue layer, sorry. If I can't make a copy of it because I've still got my selective color is the active layer. Make sure that you've got the image is your active layer, and then simply copy the blue. Simply drag it down, make a copy of it, and you would call this highlights. We've saved that part. Go back to your selective color. Select the selective color in the properties panel. Drag the whites all the way back to the right-hand side. It fills the whites with black. Grab your blacks now. Drag it all the way. This is a shadow mask. Hey, Daniel. Guys, this is Daniel Livingston. He's actually a graduate of Columbia College, and he wanted to come by. He actually does this stuff for a living, and wanted to just have a brief, quick talk with you guys about what he does. If you can stick around, that'd be great. If you got to run, that's fine, whatever. But anyway, that's what's going on. Are there questions about this? Okay, one last thing to show you that'll blow everybody away. As long as you've got the blacks already selected like that, go back up to your whites and drag that slider all the way to the right. This is a highlight shadow mask. The only thing that's being protected here are the midtones. This is how you can build masks to do split toning. Your highlights one color, your shadows are different. Make sense on all this? I'll see you guys next week. Daniel, the room is yours.